Thank you for taking the time to view this video. My remarks and any material are made without prejudice and are based upon my understanding of the situation. For the few of you that don't know me, my name is James Bright, and Marlene and I have lived in the Landmark for over 23 years. During that time, we've enjoyed many activities, including bingo and shuffleboard and bus trips and with the social club, and it's really been a wonderful place to live. In fact, during that time, we've lived actually in 3 different units, but we've never considered leaving the building. Now, before you get bored, please bear with me, as the upcoming director election may be the most important in our history and our only opportunity to restore the cohesive, supportive community environment we once had at the Landmark. And it all hinges on the biggest, most important project we have ever undertaken, the Windows Project. Now, I did say, you noticed that we've been here for 23 years, however, not all of it has been the greatest time. About 6 years ago, several individuals moved to the Landmark, and within a very short period of time, it became clear that they appeared to have a different agenda, certainly different from what most of us have enjoyed to this point. Quite frankly, they appeared to be activist disruptors with an agenda that, amongst other things, played on the fears of vulnerable seniors. Their activities included such silly things as going down in the garage and checking to see where the cars were parked properly between the lines, to much more serious activities such as fraudulent charges and accusations against other residents involving the police, and an unsubstantiated assault allegation within the building. And then starting a campaign in opposition to the Windows Project. In 2020, 2 directors were elected to the board. It became quite clear quickly that they were not what I would call team members, and they were interested in not resolving conflicts, but rather to cause conflicts. And in concert with the dissident disruptors, as I call them, undertook a program using the Window Project as their excuse for attempting major changes within the Landmark. They started a requisition to remove several directors from the board and actually did get the board president to resign. However, they withdrew the requisition when they realized they didn't have anything close to the number of votes they needed, so they had very little support for their program. They attempted to remove Whitehill Management, which, as you recall, was Jennifer and Melissa in those days, and indirectly Vidal and Dawn. And they challenged the validity of the Whitehill contract, resulting in the board passing a special resolution recognizing the contract till the end of 2024. In spite of the resolution, and with no direction from the board, called for a management review committee and entertained presentation from 3 major management companies. Interesting enough, one of the management companies was Crossbridge Management that they recommended. Coincidentally, they manage the King's Garden condos where John Morrow lived, and the condo fees are $1.05 per square foot, compared to the Landmark fees, which are presently 78 cents per foot under Whitehill. At a Zoom town hall meeting, Mike Helmy refused to endorse the Window Project. He stated it was his private decision and he did not have to disclose his position. At the 2022 AGM, Helmy again refused to confirm his position regarding the windows. At a subsequent meeting on November the 26th, 22, Mike Helmy, when pressed, stated, "I do not support the Window Project at this time." It seems as a board member, Helmy appears to be ignoring the 2020 engineering report calling for the windows to be replaced. So where am I going with all this? The Window Project has 2 financing options. Approve the funding package and get the windows done as quickly as we can, or a future funding option, which means the windows would be deferred for at least 7 years. Doing nothing actually costs you more money than we all agree going with the Window Project now. We know what inflation has come down to, and whatever the windows are going to cost today could be conservatively 2 to 3 times as much down the road, aside from what it's going to do to the overall value of your condo and your condo fees. Although we don't have any final estimates for the cost of the windows at this point, I think we can make an educated estimate to the outcome if the future funding option is taken. Condo fees will more than double based upon this compounded annual condo fee rate of 9% for the next 7 years. Now keep in mind, we've had, give or take, 9% for the last 3 years, so the 9% may be very conservative. Now I'd like to show you some graphs. So the purpose of these graphs is to demonstrate the difference between future funding and using the funding package. So with the future funding, you end up, as I'll show you, you pay more, you get a promise of windows, and your unit decreases in value, in my opinion. So taking a typical unit of an 01, a 12, or an 05, they're all very similar. The condo fees presently are $918. If you use a 9% compounding fee, remember that's what we've had for the last 3 years, that $918 over 7 years, so to 2031, becomes $1,994. That in fact, it's over double. At the same time, what a lot of people don't realize is that because of the high condo fees, the value of your unit is going to decrease considerably. So that unit, unimproved, has a value right now of about $531,000. Using a 5% compounded depreciation rate, you're at $531,000 at the end of 2030, means that unit's only worth $334,000. So about a 50% drop. It's pretty dramatic. However, if we go for the funding bylaw, where we get the windows over the next 2 or 3 years and get everything underway, here's what happens. In that same illustration, the condo fees are $918, same as they were here, of course. But with a 2.5% increase, which is fairly standard for the industry, that $918 will become $1,147 in 2031, compared with almost $2,000 in this example. And the other thing that's really important, because we have to look at our assets, is that this unit, which again we're using the value of $531,000, the same as up here, and using a 5%, which is a very conservative real estate appreciation rate, it goes up and it's now worth $823,000. So I can't put it any simpler than that. Let me show you another one. And I have graphs for all of these, but just as another example. The 03s, 7s, and 10s, which are your 3-bedroom, 2-bath units. Same situation with the future funding bylaw. For the future, you have a present condo fee of $1,535. Using the 9% condo appreciation, increase I should say, that $535 becomes $3,334. I mean, it's more than double. At the same time, that unit, and would be an improved unit, which has a value of about $875,000 right now, is going to go down to probably $550,000. So a 50% drop. So that's the impact, again, of using future funding. Down here, same thing. Now we go for the funding bylaw, we have the windows very shortly and that sort of thing. Same condo fees, $1,535, except they're going up at a rate of about 2.5%. So that $1,535 becomes $1,917, compared with $3,334. I think you can see it. I don't have to explain it. It's called cash flow. At the same time, the value of this unit, which was $875 we're using, and using a conservative 5% appreciation, the same as up here, is now worth $1,357,000. That's the best argument, just when you see the real raw numbers, even though they're estimated, of why we should be doing the funding bylaw now. So as I previously said, with the future funding, you end up with no windows and a special assessment 7 years down the road. With doing the funding bylaw, we get the windows now. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples of condo projects that were recently sort of similar to what we're going through right now. Rosedale Glen condominiums with 108 units replaced their windows actually during COVID in 2022. They started a future funding program 6 years ago now. So over a 5-year period, they increased their reserve fund contribution in the first year by 11%, the second year 15%, the third year 10%, and on for another 10% each year for 5 years. Plus a special average assessment at the end of the project of $24,000. So even with the future funding of short term of 5 years, okay, with the annual reserve fund increase of over 10% per year, they still needed a special assessment. So what I'm saying is, at the end of a future funding, it isn't like the reserve fund is going to have enough money to pay for it. Probably wouldn't even have half of it. Another example is 2020 and 2010 Islington Avenue condominiums. It's a project similar to ours. There are 300 units. And if you can imagine, they started funding the reserve fund for the windows project in 2007. However, still had a special average assessment of $25,000 in 2019 when their window replacement started. Now we all say, ask Google. So if you Google and put in the phrase, what happens when condo fees get too high? This is what you'll find. And I quote, there is some truth to the notion that higher maintenance fees will impact the price of your condo unit when you sell it. If your maintenance fees are high, then your sale price per unit will likely be lower. Lower condo fees mean better resale value. End of quotation. I can also assure you, as I tried to illustrate on the graphs, that your unit with the high condo fees will no longer be competitive in the market, and so it'll be worth an awful lot less, maybe as much as 50% less. There have been a couple of comments about why our windows seem to be more expensive than, say, a couple of the other projects I just mentioned. The good news is we have great windows. The bad news is we have great windows, meaning that the design of the building has resulted in an estimated 35 to 40% more glass or windows than in a more conventional rectangular shaped building. You know, when I think about it, for many of us, if we were still living in our previous homes, we would have replaced the windows and the roof and the heating and the air conditioning possibly more than once during a 45-year period. So believe me, Marlene and I are the last ones that want to put a lot of money into the windows. However, we recognize that we really have no choice if we want to maintain the building that we have now. So the bottom line is the windows must be replaced. It is cheaper for each and every one of us if we start the project now. And to accomplish this, we need strong board representation with directors who will responsibly manage the affairs of our condo and follow the recommendations of the engineering reports. We require directors who will abide by the Code of Ethics, which is in our rules and bylaws, 2.4, and it reads, amongst other things, I will only act in the best interest of the condominium corporation as a whole. Now I emphasize that, condominium corporation as a whole. And then it goes on to further say, and I will not favor the interests of any individual or group of owners or residents. I kind of think that we have one director who has not been abiding by that code of ethics. So we have 4 candidates for you to consider. Daniel Gallone, Mike Helmy, John Morrow, and Terry Stanley. I want you to review their bios and think to yourself, who do we, I guess, want to entrust to restore the landmark to the wonderful community environment, sometimes referred to as our vertical village? Ask yourself this, is Mike Helmy representing the interests of the corporation, as the Code of Ethics calls for, or a small group of individual residents? How many years ago did John Morrow serve on the board of a condo? The Ontario Condo Act has changed substantially over the last 15 years. 3, where do Mike Helmy and John Morrow stand on the Windows project, the funding package, and the Whitehill contract? Now I can tell you for sure that Daniel Gallone and Terry Stanley are in favor of immediate window replacement utilizing the funding package, or, if it's not approved, a special assessment, which will still mean the windows are done immediately, and the retention of Whitehill for the duration of their contract. Now what can you do? We need you to vote only for the candidates at the AGM who are committed to getting the windows done now. This means candidates that are in favor of the windows, funding bylaw, or an immediate special assessment. So in closing, I'm going to quote President John Kennedy, famous statement, slightly abbreviated. Ask not what the landmark can do for you, but rather what can you do for the future of the landmark? Thank you.